Good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang in California with Morsels of a Thought number 1699, the last of the 1600s. We celebrate the nines in Chinese culture. I have no idea what the numbers mean this particular time, but tomorrow will be 1700. Today, I am going to go through Epictetus's The Complete Works Handbook, Discourses, and Fragments, edited and translated by Robin Waterfield. Now, I am talking about things on Wednesday that are not necessarily the same as what everybody else thinks, but as long as we're united in some way to continue our democracy, all we have to do is reject the out of protocol methods that are being used. Anyway, Epictetus's Stoicism has been in vogue. Everybody has been talking about it, and we can't miss it. So I want us to catch up on the section that we left off at. Now we left off at 1597. That was 2000, no, 1002 lives ago. So that's a lot of lives. Anyway, Epictetus's Stoicism. No, 1600. No, 102 days ago. So that's about 4 months. Anyway, with Epictetus's Stoicism, we're going to try to find things that we can use as a philosophy for our lives. When we are sure of the right things to do, that is considered a form of wisdom. And when we actually do those things that we know are the right things to do, we are committing acts of virtue. So, what Epictetus has talked about is the four virtues. He has different virtue breakdowns, but he has a set of them, and he does what he says does coincide with what I say. So, Epictetus's Stoicism. All these Stoic doctrines appear in the foreground or background of discourses. Whether Epictetus emphasizes a particular aspect of Stoicism or plays it down, his purpose is always pedagogical and his focus always on practical application rather than theory. Above all, he wants to cut through the complexities of Stoic theory to the simplicity at its core, and he wants to show that thanks to God's providential benevolence toward humankind, we have all the resources we need to change and achieve happiness and peace of mind. Whenever he treats topics such as death, exile, fear, or anxiety, he always explains how they fit into the big picture, how just a few basic principles justify the Stoic approach to such matters. The simplest and most fundamental point is the one with which Arian, Arrian, rightly starts the handbook. Quote, some things are up to us and some things are not. End quote. Some things are up to us and some are not. This was not a new idea in Stoicism. For instance, in claiming that the world we live in and the events we experience are all predetermined, excuse me, facets of an endless chain of necessary causation, the Stoics left only our inner life as the sphere where we could exercise choice and be considered responsible. This is about wisdom now. The occurrence of impressions is not up to us, but our response to those impressions is. What is different in Epictetus, as far as we can tell, given the loss of most earlier Stoic literature, is the emphasis he puts on this idea. So inner thoughts are the places where you would put your wisdom. Okay? Now they say, what does it mean to say that all things are up to us? At 1.1.12, Epictetus summarizes the faculties that constitute the inner life of a human being. The quote, faculty of inclination and disinclination, of desire and aversion, or to generalize, the faculty of making use of impressions, end quote. Footnote 49. By, quote, making use of impressions, end quote, he means that we do not have to be taken in by appearances. That is so true. We need to test them with our rational minds to see whether or not they deserve assent. Footnote 50. This message is strongly urged through constant repetition. If we assess impressions correctly, we will assign the correct value to everything we come across in our lives, which in turn means that we will feel only the right kinds of inclinations and we will therefore act only in appropriate ways. We will act only in appropriate ways. It is entirely up to us to see that our actions this is called harvesting energy. In Chinese Qigong, a yawn induced is better than a lot of things. Anyway, it is entirely up to us to see that our actions are motivated by correct judgments and to avoid being motivated by bad judgments. And being motivated by correct judgments is the source of all that is good. Whether or not we use impressions correctly is a matter of what Epictetus calls, quote, will, end quote, prohairesis, prohairesis, footnote 51. The central importance he places on correct use of impressions led Epictetus to give will far greater prominence than his predecessors had. We are reading Epictetus, the complete works, the handbook. We're reading part of the foreword, edited and translated by Robin Waterfield. This is Words and Wisdom Wednesday. Okay. Will is the faculty that makes use of impressions, 2.23.5 all the way to 13. It gives us freedom to assent or not to an impression. The root of the word prohairesis implies choice. In itself, will is unstoppable in the sense that if we correct our beliefs and judgments, we will always get what we want and act as we intend. If it seems far-fetched to suggest that all our desires can be satisfied, it must be remembered that aspirants are supposed to reduce their desires, e.g., 3.9.22, until they want only good things, and that in any case they always act with reservation, tuning what they desire to their circumstances. See the note to Handbook 2.2. Since nothing and nobody can either compel or hinder our will, it is entirely up to us to choose one action rather than another. Put this way, as at e.g. 1.1.23, 2.15.1, and 3.26.24, it sounds as though Epictetus was getting close to the notion of free will, that is, the power to do otherwise. This is not quite right, however. Free will is something that everyone is supposed to have, but the kind of freedom Epictetus is talking about is hard won, not an automatic aspect of what it is to be human. Since the will is free, if it consists of a perfectly consistent set of true beliefs about the value of things, only the Stoic sage truly has freedom of will, while the rest of us compromise its freedom by enslaving ourselves, more or less, to the external world by false beliefs and wrong judgments. Freedom of will is something we should aim for, but it is not a birthright. And another reason for not equating Epictetus's concept of will with free will is that prohioresis is a rational faculty, or rather, it is the rational faculty, operating with the mental faculties and activities that are up to us. So, for Epictetus, will is not entirely free because he does not allow for our choices being determined by anything other than right reason, such as hopes or feelings. To Epictetus's way of thinking, will is only free in the sense that it is not constrained by external circumstances. 4.1.128 to 131. Since we are essentially rational, self-conscious, purposive decision-making agents, prohioresis is equivalent to our moral selves. 1.8.17, 1.19.8, 3.18.3, 4.5.11, 4.5.23, Handbook 9. This is footnote 52. Because it makes use of all the other faculties, 2.23.6, 2.23.28, it is the sum of all the faculties that are entirely up to us and make each of us who and what we are. Will can even be bad or corrupted if someone uses these faculties to identify within his body or external possessions rather than things that are up to us. That is, if he makes bad use of externals, misjudging their value, 1.17.26, 1.25.1, 1.29.1, 2.1.6, 2.16.1, 2.23.19, 2.23.43, 4.5.32, 4.12.7. Will can be ruined, 4.4.23, and it may need purifying, 2.23 to 4.40, improving, 3.5.2, or freeing, 1.14.18, 3.5.7. Everything we consciously do, however trivial, stems from our will and is therefore indicative of our moral character. As part of this program of cutting through to the core of Stoicism, Epictetus pushed into the background the controversial distinction between preferred and dispreferred indifference. Indifference. Controversial because it allowed a critic to charge a Stoic with admitting that some indifference might be good and put a greater emphasis solely on aspiring to virtue. Quote, things are good, bad, or indifferent. The virtues and everything in which the virtues play a part are good, and their opposites are bad. Indifferent are things like wealth, health, and status. 2.9.15. This perspective served his pedagogical purpose of focusing his students on their ultimate goal without confusing them with possible distractions. A final difference of emphasis between Epictetus and his Stoic predecessors is the significance he gives to our roles in life. He talks little of the four cardinal virtues because he substitutes talk of roles and of acting in accord with nature. Footnote 53. He does not say, for instance, that as citizens we should behave with justice toward our fellow citizens. He just says that we should act as citizens he says that he just says that we should act as citizens properly should. Since virtue is what is good, since we strive for the good in all things, and since we cannot help but be entwined in certain social relationships, we have to bring virtue to bear on those relationships. I have a role as a human being, this is the translator speaking, but I also have a role as a particular human being, 3.23.4. And this role divides into numerous sub-roles because the particular person I am is also a son, a husband, a father, a citizen, and so on, 2.10.1 to 14, 3.23.3 to 5, Handbook 30, footnote 54. In addition, I must also adapt myself to the roles that fortune assigns me, fragment 11, or that I choose after due consideration of my native abilities, 1.6.37, 2.6.3, 3.22.7, 3.23.1 to 6, Handbook 29.5, and 37. Epictetus never offers advice as to how to behave as a brother, say, or as a son. He assumes his students already know. In other words, it is the behavior sanctioned by Roman tradition or common humanity. Hence, for instance, he counsels deference to a father, 2.10.7, Handbook 30. Now we are reading Epictetus's Stoicism. It's an introduction to Epictetus's Stoicism, and we are on 1699 days in a row. I've come to you to try to bring up some words and wisdom today. When we know the right things to do for ourselves, that's wisdom. And when we actually do them, we're committing acts of virtue. So I want us all to be able to say that we do our good self care and that we do care for others. When we care for others, we have purposes in life. But if we don't care about others, we have a purposeless life. So try to care about others. You don't have to care about everyone around you, but you may have to sort of, like Debbie Baza says, wish the bastard has a nice day. Okay. In addition, she's a comic, to talking about the plurality of roles that each of us has, he also talks about one's role in the singular, 1.2, Handbook 37. He means the face or facade, that is the literal meaning of the Greek word for role, prosopon, that we present to the world. The part that we play on life's stage, the word also means theatrical role, as in 1.29.46 and Handbook 17. He does not take this role to be something superficial, but rather an aspect of our integrity, the kind of person we have chosen to be, or that fate has cast us to be, and a reflection of our true nature. In the terms of a pervasive metaphor employed by Epictetus, it is our station in life where we have been posted by the divine commander in chief, e.g., 1.16.21, 1.29.39, 3.24.34, 3.24.95. But it needs training to acquire 1.2.32, Handbook 33, and practice to stay true to it. It is what makes one unique, not just the same as all the other threads in the toga, as he puts it at 1.2.18 and 3.1.23. It therefore, and this is the underlying message of 1.2, has ethical implications in that different people need to develop or tone down different aspects of their personality in order to act appropriately and progress toward virtue. I'm going to read one more paragraph. Whether Epictetus is talking about roles in the singular or plural, they have the same function. When it comes to making ethical decisions, we should refer to our roles. Whether or not you assent to an impression is determined in part by the kind of person you are or take yourself to be. Roles have consequences, ROLES, and once we have accepted a role, we should accept as reasonable anything that follows from that role. Appropriate behavior is living in accord with nature or focusing only on things that are up to us, subject to our will. 3.1.25 to 26, and treating all other human beings as kin, K-I-N, as that is, with kindness and justice, e.g., 2.4.1 to 5, 2.9.1 to 7, 4.1.2122. 4.1.122. Along with his development of the concept of prohieresis, this role ethics, quote unquote, role ethics, is Epictetus's most distinctive contribution to Stoicism. There is a tension in, there's a tension, tension, tension. There is a tension in Epictetus's thought between the, I'm reading another paragraph, between the claim that even family members should be nothing to us, e.g. 1.1.14 and 3.3 to 3.3.5 to 7, and the frequently repeated claim that it is an aspect of morality to foster our relationships with family members and others, e.g., 2.14.8, 3.2.4, 4.4.16, 4.10.15. The solution is given by 3.3.8. See also 2.17.19, 2.22.18 to 21. We maintain our relationships without thinking that father, brother, and other relatives and friends are the good. The good, our goal, is purely internal. If our focus is on the good, we can fulfill our duties toward our kin without being as, quote, unfeeling as a statue, end quote, 3.2.4, but also without making the mistake of thinking that family members are ultimately that important. In the same way, we look after our bodies, 1.2.37, 4.11, fragment 23, while not identifying ourselves with our bodies. He's talking about the self as being separate from our body, and that's a truism. In other words, when persons die, their consciousness is still there. We know it. There is some scientific research about it nowadays. Boy, that was a lot of cat hair in my hair. Um, Gee whiz, I had a lot of cat hair in my eye. Anyway, so I will read. Let me see if I have room for one more. Yes, I do. We will finish this section. As a teacher, Epictetus kept his focus on his students and their moral development. So he does not ban all passions, nor does he stress the remote ideal of the enlightened age. He often talks in more or less everyday terms about everyday issues. He also, along with the other Roman Stoics, stresses the importance to the individual of social responsibility. He expects his students to engage not just with the political life of their communities, but also with the everyday life of friendship, marriage, and parenting. This move was not incompatible with, with traditional Stoicism, but it represented a swerve or a shift of emphasis. If the earlier Stoics had claimed that true friendship can subsist only between and among people who are wise, the four Roman Stoics emphasized that as rational creatures, all human beings are kin. You could say that in abandoning the more austere concepts of Greek Stoicism, they were substituting reality for utopia. That would be true, but at the same time, all the Stoics of the Roman period retained what was at the heart of Stoic ethics, the insistence on training until the rational self was the source of all one's actions. We are on Epictetus on philosophical training next. We're page 30 in this book. We have read some of it. We are not going to be left behind in the Stoicism race. So this was for Morsels of a Thought number 1699. I hope it kind of pounded into our heads the idea of virtue being the most important thing that we aspire to. In other words, knowing the right things to do and the courage and determination to do them. Courage and determination. Confidence, courage, and determination. Okay, that was from Dr. Yen. Okay, old Kinderhook. Bye bye.